days from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. We're going to kind of dive into Syria to start off, just because, more of the information keeps coming out that, well, they don't know, we're not sure, we don't know where, there's not quite any evidence, and it's just one of those things that a lot of people that were Trump supporters are pretty upset about this. Definitely when Trump talked about Obama when he was getting ready to do the exact same thing. But, early on I told you that Trump isn't exactly a military guy. He even though, he understands military strategy, all that. He has a lot of respect. He has put that responsibility more in the general's hands, and he gets swayed to just sign off. And I think a lot of that just comes from him feeding into the military-industrial complex in a business way, too, because, well, we can make more missiles and, stir up more trouble that way. There's a lot of different reasons he could have done it, but really, you just have to call out the evidence. Hold on, is there any evidence? Do we have proof? Or are we just, show us the proof, let outside inspectors. No, we're just going to hurry up and demolish the whole area. Again, it's one of those deals that I don't know who did it. And it's really hard to find out who did it after a military drops bombs all over the area. I'm going to get into this Ron Paul Liberty report. Former UK ambassador reveals truth about Syria with special guest Peter Ford. So I want to get into this clip here, and we'll talk about it here
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. And Daniel, good to see you this morning.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing very well, and I'm very fascinated with our guest today. We have a special guest, and he knows a lot about what's going on in Syria, and that's the subject of the day and the subject of the past week. So I'm very pleased with that. Now, our special guest is a diplomat, British diplomat, and he was a ambassador to Bahrain between '09 and '03, but then he became the ambassador in Syria from '03, '06. So he knows the regions, he knows the territory, he's keeping up with what's going on. It's Ambassador Peter Ford. Ambassador, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. It's an honor.
Very good, and we do have some questions here for you because you're the expert, and we're always trying to learn. But, you know, first off, there's activity going on right now about, most of the story's been out that the inspectors couldn't go in to prove there was nothing going on. They hurried up and did the bombing, you know, that sort of thing. Now the inspectors are trying to get back in, and that's the OPCW, but they're not doing well. They're not there yet unless they got in there in the last few minutes. And I've heard a couple stories for that. One is that the UN didn't give them the approval to go in. And then again, a Russian ambassador or a Russian figure said, no, it's the jihadists that are keeping them out. Can you sort of sort that out for me? I'm not quite sure why they're not getting in there. I know there's some people who don't want them in there to find the truth, but it just seems confusing to me who's really keeping them out, since theoretically that area is controlled by the Syrian government.
Well, I think it's probably some jihadis who had gone to ground who are firing off a few shots. It only takes a couple of shots to spook the UN. I speak as a former UN official because when I retired from the diplomatic service, I joined the UN in the Middle East and was an official based in Amman, just down the road from Damascus, for 8 years. And I know from experience, I used to go to dangerous places like Gaza. I know that the UN is very meticulous about the safety of its staff. They require new security assessments every time there's a new development, like a bombing. This is part of the reason for the delay. The UN has needed to make constant reassessment, but then shots have been fired. They can really only have come from the jihadi side, and you can see what the objective is. It's to cause delay because this will tend to devalue the findings of the mission. People like my own government will say, oh, so many days have passed, the evidence has got degraded, their verdict can be discounted. This is very likely what is happening. Or the jihadi groups off their own bat have decided that it's in their interest to prevent the truth emerging.
Neil has a question, a comment.
Yeah, Ambassador Ford, you've been a thorn in the side of the establishment, not only yours over there, but ours here, by challenging the dominant narrative. And, you know, we're very interested on this program in the media and how the mainstream media behaves. And one thing I find absolutely fascinating is, to me it seems, to most people it seems, that the role of the media in a free society is to question the pronouncements of their governments. But in this case, we see in the Times over there and many other publications, you're demonized for questioning the government's official pronouncements. They call you all sorts of terrible names for daring to question your government. Isn't that the media's job, to question the government?
Yeah. Radio stations like Radio Scotland kicking up a fuss, and the Rex the recording of the program to go viral.
Yes, we saw that. Didn't one BBC presenter say to you just yesterday something about, let's put these facts aside for a few minutes? Wasn't there a quote like this somewhere? I think I saw. Forget the facts.
Yeah, well, that's my shtick. I'm not into theories. I deal in facts. And these have been conspicuously missing in the run-up to latest episode and continue to be missing. For example, how often do you see it reported in most of the media that this mission by the international expert was requested not by America, not by my government, not by France, as you might have expected if they had wanted to get to the bottom of it. No, it was by the government of Syria and the government of Russia. I think this tells us something about who is keen to get to the real truth.
Yeah, that seems to be that would wake them up, but sometimes logic doesn't prevail. I did have a question about, there was a report also today about some canisters and bombs found, had some chlorine in, and smoke bombs, and they said that they were from either Great Britain and or Germany. Is that significant at all in your analysis?
There are various possibilities. No, it's not significant because the jihadis are extremely clever. It's quite within their capability to lay a false trail, to mislead the inspectors. In fact, I'd be very surprised if they hadn't. I have heard that the inspectors have received tip-offs about where there are graves of victims, and I dare say if they go to these sites, they will find bodies which have been contaminated by the jihadis trying to mislead the inspectors. So a lot of chaff and disinformation and false and red herrings are being thrown up.
Mr. Ambassador, I would like to read to you a tweet that just came out before we started the show, and it's from Representative Thomas Massey, who's a U.S. representative from Kentucky. He's also on the board of our Ron Paul Institute, so he's obviously a very intelligent and clear-thinking individual, but we have a lot of admiration. But let me just read you this and maybe have you react to it if you don't mind. He had obviously just come from a briefing from the executive branch. He said, in a briefing to Congress, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of State provided zero real evidence. They referenced information circulating online, which means either they chose not to provide proof to Congress or they don't have conclusive proof that Assad carried out the gas attack. Either way, not good. Very interesting. It seems like some holes are starting to be poked into the narrative.
That doesn't surprise me in the least. Mattis, General Mattis, the day before the launching of the strike, was telling Congress, look, guys, the only evidence we have so far is press reports and social media. What? You're going to war on gossip? Well, unbelievable. And then miraculously, some magic bullet of intelligence arrives that we still haven't seen. We have no inkling whatever. The closest that Mrs. May has got to delivering some of this intelligence is that, well, we have evidence that there was a helicopter and it dropped a barrel bomb. Come on. It was an open knowledge that there was bombing going on because the jihadis hadn't surrendered. Yeah, but ordinary bombing. None of the evidence that has been put forward to date, none of the videos, none of the statements by government is inconsistent with the very likely fact that there was conventional bombing going on. Folks got smoke inhalation. They went to this underground clinic, and that's where the White Helmets staged the incident. The White Helmets, who, as you probably know, are the jihadi auxiliaries who help in beheadings, and when they're not helping in beheadings. They are helping to produce fake videos. These hoaxers shouted gas, gas to produce panic. Everybody went into gas mode. They got hold of hoses, I think, and shoved inhalers at kids. When you look again at the videos, I think you can see the reality of what happened, but we've been primed by having it repeated over and over again that this is gas attack, this is gas attack. We've been primed. Our brains can't adjust to the fact that there might be another explanation, but when you look at the videos, you will see it can all be explained in terms of an ordinary bomb causing smoke inhalation in some people, and some of the kids have even been dragged in off the street, and now some of them are even being interviewed on TV. We recognize their faces. One boy in particular has been on TV, Syrian TV today, saying they enticed us in with cookies and dates, and then they sprayed us with water. We didn't know what the hell was going on.
Right. Ambassador, you recall, and I recall very clearly what went on leading up to the Iraq War, and you were an ambassador in Bahrain. Now, there are some comparisons here that can be made, but it took a long time for those of us back then arguing the case that it was unnecessary and didn't believe the lies that led up to that war. And yet today, most people believe that war was based on lies and it was a bad war and all this. But now they're doing this again. Do you think we're doing a better job at revealing the truth to the general public in these last couple weeks? Or do you think we're just about as just as stymied as we were back in Iraq, and that someday, they're 10 years from now, to say, those guys were right, it was all fake? Well, how do you compare the two? Do you think we're doing a better job in revealing the truth than we were able to back leading up to the Iraq War?
Well, I think there's one big difference, that the elites continue to take the Kool-Aid, but the ordinary people are smarter. And ordinary people in Britain, and I suspect America, remember Iraq, partly because I keep reminding them. They remember what we called in England the dodgy dossier, of fake evidence. This time we haven't even had a dodgy dossier. Nothing. So I think the elites are beginning to panic, because now we have more than in those days of the Iraq War. We've got the internet, social media. The real truth gets around, and people are asking more questions. This is one difference, but most of the mainstream media, as well as our governments, are still conducting a very savage disinformation war, and they must be terrified that the truth will come out, because imagine if we're right, the government has been lying to us in a major way, an issue of war and peace. Either that, or they have been incredibly naive. Either way, I think President Trump has been grossly misled by his advisors. How could they not tell him that the white helmets are these guys who help at beheadings? How could they tell him that these are credible witnesses? This is like saying that, the story of Little Red Riding Hood. This is like saying that the wolf is a trusted source. Unbelievable. Laughable. It would be laughable if it were not so dreadfully tragic. Right. And the really awful thing is that we're just setting ourselves up for an action replay a few months down the pipe, which really is going to be very, very tragic, because we're leaving ourselves no exit route.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, you have an advantage over probably 80 or 90% of our own diplomatic corps, which is that you actually speak the language of the countries that you follow. You're fluent in Arabic, as I understand, so you have a deeper and richer sense of what's happening there. Now, if we can back up a little bit, I'd like to look back. You were the ambassador in Syria in 2006. And we know from a few sources, we know, for example, from WikiLeaks, that's around the time that the cable was sent from the U.S. Embassy in Damascus back to Maine State in Washington, outlining the different ways of overthrowing the Assad government back in '06. I remember, because I was on Capitol Hill working for Dr. Paul, that the Syrian government at that time was trying to make a bit of a charm offensive to open the door with the U.S. They had a few meetings with us in our office and elsewhere. I'm wondering, as an ambassador there in '06, did you see kind of a shift in U.S. policy toward regime change? Could you tell there was a shift, that things were changing as far back as that?
Yes, I think so. When I first arrived in Damascus in 2003, the honeymoon with Assad really was underway. I arrived 1 month after Assad had been having tea in Buckingham Palace with Her Majesty the Queen. So he was in good odor at that time. Although even then there was some reticence on the part of the United States. But as the months and the years passed, it became clearer and clearer that the United States had not come off the agenda of regime change. And indeed, it was being stated openly in around 2005 that Assad was on the hit list, that once they removed Saddam, Assad was going to be next. And it was for this reason that Assad tried to make things difficult for the United States in Iraq by allowing the passage through his territory of jihadis coming up mainly from Jordan. This was a very dangerous ploy. It was something with the devil, but he saw it as self-preservation, because if the U.S. forces didn't get bogged down in Iraq, he knew that he was next on the list.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, the Italians decided not to participate in the bombing, which I guess wasn't too big a surprise, at least for me. But the fact that the submarine that participated, the U.S. submarine, is not permitted to go back to port in Italy, that, I don't know how much that has significance, but what other country might be in that category of just saying, well, we'd like you to participate, but we flat out don't want to participate? Any other surprises to you of somebody else that may have taken a different position than the United States and Britain?
I think Turkey tried to have it both ways. I'm not sure if at the end of the day they allowed use of the big US bases in Turkey. Turkey was blowing hot and cold. But the important thing here is that the tripartite aggressors, as they're called in the region, Britain, France, and America, did not have UN backing. Now, it will be objected that Russia would have blocked that in the Security Council, but there is an alternative procedure called Uniting for Peace, whereby states in a grave situation can go to the General Assembly and just get a majority there. We didn't even try for that. We knew that we wouldn't be persuasive, and we were in a rush. We were in a rush to carry out this illegal attack before the OPCW, International Chemical Inspectors, could get there and very likely attest to the fact that there was no evidence.
Well, I guess, Mr. Ambassador, we'll probably, in a way, almost finish where we should have started, because, you really caught my attention. Well, of course, I've been following you for a long time, but the Scottish BBC radio interview was such a classic, and you uttered the great line that even a child could understand this, the illogic of Assad using gas at that particular point. So I was wondering maybe if you could go back to that and present that argument that you made, why it is so absolutely illogical. Maybe you're speaking to the converted in our audience, but if you could do that and then say a little prediction of where you think we go from here.
Yeah, well, my government keeps trying, and the U.S. administration keep trying to say that Assad is just a monster and he likes gassing little children for the hell of it. That's about the logic of what they're saying, because it ignores the simple fact that even a child would appreciate that he's winning the war. He has victory in sight. He had recovered 95% of the territory near Damascus, the eastern Ghouta. He had the town of Douma in the palm of his hand. 3,000 jihadis had left just the day before. All that was left was a haggle about the money. The jihadis wanted to take with them $900 million of their loot. They weren't fighting. They were just haggling and lobbing some mortars into the government-held Damascus. So he had absolutely no motive. And to say that it was militarily significant to kill a few hundred civilians. And anyway, there's no evidence that even more than 20 were involved in the incident. But you have to have cabbage for brains to believe this nonsense. This is total horse feathers.
Well, you know what somebody else suggested, and it's a relative of mine, he said the only way he could do that is if he was the stupidest dictator on the whole planet, and I don't think he qualifies for that. But anyway, Ambassador, we're going to have to go, but I really want to thank you for coming on. Deeply appreciate it. I know the audience is going to really enjoy the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Very good. And I want to address our audience for a second, and that is to remind you to come back soon to the Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out, subscribe. I did just get a little news flash from Fox News across my phone here. It said North Korea suspends missile testing, closing nuclear test site, report said. And let it pull up here. North Korea announced Friday that it will be suspending missile testing and closing a nuclear test site, several reports said. This is a developing story. So that's literally all we have. So I definitely wouldn't hold your breath on that, but we'll see where that turns out down the road. I want to get back to this, if I can get back to this. I might have to restart this here. Sorry, guys. Let me see if I can bring it up on my phone where I try to get it back up on the computer. Okay, sorry guys. I think I'm going to have it here, hopefully. No. Failure to launch. kind of going into our foreign policy, I want to bring up the Syrian article, but until I get to that point, I had this from Reason.com. Mike Pompeo's reckless approach to North Korea shows why he shouldn't be Secretary of State. There are many reasons CIA Director Mike Pompeo should not be Secretary of State, but his reckless, dishonest, and incoherent remarks about North Korea policy before the Senate last week may be chief among them. This becomes all the more troubling given President Trump's Wednesday announcement that Pompeo is already at the forefront of U.S.-North Korea relations, having met with Kim last week. Testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Pompeo spoke on North Korea policy repeatedly, but two exchanges most deserve note. The first at the 53-minute mark of C-SPAN's video began when Senator Ben Cardin, Democrat, pressed Pompeo to clarify his preferred outcome for resolution of U.S.-North Korea tensions. Pompeo was evasive, claiming it as a misstatement to say he supports regime change and offering the exceedingly vague goal of a position where Kim Jong-un is unable to threaten the United States with a nuclear weapon, which could mean anything from assassination to Kim's sudden embrace of the American dream. When Cardin kept pushing, Pompeo said he has never advocated for regime change and is not doing so now, writes Bonnie Christian. So, you know, Ron Paul's made this argument before that, you know, countries, you're going to have to expect them to want nuclear weapons if they're looking for a platform. If they want to have a say, it seems like only the nuclear countries have any type of say, or almost just the defense against someone, whether it be United States, you know, other nuclear countries coming in. I'm just getting basically the same update. Okay. So, when you look at, we need to denuclearize North Korea, I definitely believe that North Korea is a little scary with the nuke, just because of the type of threats they make with them. But at the same time, I don't think that the people at the top are cut off enough from the outside world to realize that, you know, well, we shoot one, they shoot one, then they shoot one, then they shoot one, and then, you know, it's just, there's no winner of that. And even though, you know, they might have that rhetoric, would they take that chance? Because it's not like the you know, Kim Jong-un doesn't get what he wants. Now, it really does come down to what the population, including people in the military, start to do. There could always be a big turnaround. And then you would have an ally. But really, it's that's so far down the road that really becomes more of a relevant even thought. So Sorry. Video popped on. Okay. I got my browser back up. Had another article. Let me get the pages back up now. Going as fast as I can. Okay. Now let's run fast. So just load like 5 pages. A second. Okay. This article from antiwar.com, Pentagon doubts U.S. attack destroyed Syria's chemical weapons. How convenient. Officials claim no civilians killed despite one attack targeting apartment complex. Pentagon officials offered a briefing Thursday saying they believe they have evidence that there were elements of sarin nerve gas at the sites that the U.S.-led coalition forces bombed on Friday evening. Officials said they hurt Syria's ability to research chemicals, but probably didn't eliminate their chemical weapons capacity. No evidence was offered for either. This gives the impression that Pentagon officials are still trying to sell the attack on Syria a week later, in particular claiming that Syria retains some capacity that might serve as a pretext for more U.S. attacks in the future. If nothing else, it allows the U.S. to make such allegations as they did in Duma, irrespective of the evidence. The Pentagon is clearly not being forthright on the details of the Friday attack. Officials also claimed Thursday that no civilians were killed, despite images clearly showing one of the strikes doing major damage to an apartment complex near a research facility. The Pentagon further claimed not a single of the 105 missiles were intercepted Friday. Again, videos showing interceptions were released almost immediately after the attacks. The Syrian Observatory of Human Rights also claimed 65 of the 105 were intercepted. The U.S. never offered any real proof Syria had chemical weapons or that Syria had attacked Duma with them in the first place. They rather declare them to be a fact before attacking. That leaves them trying to continue the narrative going forward, once again without solid evidence. And I think, again, that's really what it's come down to. Evidence. When you can show evidence, then we can talk about it. But one, we don't even find the evidence first. Then we don't have any discourse about it. That's why Congress is supposed to be the one that declares war. So you bring the evidence to Congress, And then all of Congress can look over it and go, okay, yeah, I'm a representative from this state. I've seen enough evidence. I'll vote yes. And you declare war. Military intervention is just a fancy word for, waging a war of some sort. It's ridiculous how they just reword things anymore. And, oh, yeah, we can ignore any law that restricts us. We'll just call it something else. Be worried if government stopped calling murder and start calling it population control. Because that's basically, what they do by going, we are going to have a military intervention here because we don't like what they're doing. What they're saying is we're going to go in and basically wage war without declaring war. And then we don't have to end a war. We don't have to sign peace treaties. They don't have to end a war. It becomes a constant war. I want to get to this article that I had come across before. Back home. Broward County Sheriff is getting a huge wake-up call from his own deputies. Broward County Sheriff Israel, who has been much maligned and criticized in the wake of the Parkland massacre, is facing even more condemnation from his own deputies. Here's what happened. The Broward Sheriff's Office Deputies Association will hold a no confidence vote against Sheriff Israel to see if enough members of the union want to condemn this sheriff. Quote, there is a complete failure at the sheriff's office and it doesn't recognize it. He doesn't recognize it, said association president Jeff Bell. Quote, the move follows many instances of suspected malfeasance, explained a statement from the Deputies Association, and the lack of leadership that has crushed morale throughout the agency. Low morale. Bell said that the department was suffering from low morale because of conflicting messages and confusion from the leadership. The association represents 1,325 deputies out of 2,560 certified deputies of the county. But you can read the rest of that article there, but that the deputies now are turning on. So that might be just to try to save their reputation. They might not even really think he did anything wrong, but to save their reputation, why not? Do you not think they could do that? I would see people doing that. Now, that doesn't mean that's what they're doing, but you see it a lot in even, your average workplace. It's not like it's something big and new. Now, when you look at all this going on, if it wasn't for alternative media and people like Ron Paul, it wouldn't get covered that much. It only gets covered when it goes along with the agenda. And it's getting harder out there for a lot of these alternative outlets to make any type of stand on social media because of the stranglehold that they put in. They've boxed basically alternative media into these corners where now only the official story is going to hit a mainstream audience. Now the only time yours is going to hit is on people that already, are your people. It's going to be way too hard for you to reach out, while you'll still see ads for all the mainstream companies and the outlets out there. But if you're alternative, it's going to be harder and harder for you to reach. Definitely, if you're bringing a lot of truth to the table, you become, that's insensitive. Also, you start getting strikes for nonsense, really. And then, you can't make money. You can't reach an audience. It can get real rough out there. I had one here from Stefan Molyneux I wanted to play. And this is talking about Zuckerberg. And we'll cover this one after.
Boy, if there ever was an intergalactic squid that gives a Me Too moment to your digital soul, that would be Facebook. And of course, as you probably know, recently, Mark Zuckerberg faced off against a semicircle crypt keeper of questioners in Congress. And most of the people who were questioning him, well, Facebook had donated quite a bit of money to. The average age of the people questioning him was 62. That's robust. And they had maybe 5 minutes to ask him questions. And so I guess Mark Zuckerberg faced a challenging situation for just about any young person, which is to try to explain to your grandmother how email works. And boy, they put in some pretty embarrassing questions. Senator Orrin Hatch, Republican from Utah, actually asked Zuckerberg, how does Facebook make money? That seems like something you'd kind of want to get squared away before asking him, given that I guess his time is about $1 jillion an hour. Someone else asked if you can read emails over WhatsApp and other embarrassing stuff. He did said it was conspiracy theory that Facebook was listening in using your phone microphones. And in response to issues around security and so on, they said, well, we're going to increase our security experts from 15,000 to 20,000, which means hiring approximately 19 high-octane security experts every single day until the end of the year, which only seems believable if you don't hire people, particularly people of any talent and skill base, on a regular basis. And they didn't seem to understand, as most people don't seem to understand, and it's understandable why they or you wouldn't understand what the business model is of Facebook. Facebook collects massive amounts of data, but it does not officially sell that data. What they do is they sell advertising spots, right? So that's really important. They don't sell the raw data because that's kind of giving up the magic sauce that makes their whole business model work. What they do is they sell placements. So an advertiser goes up and said, and I did this back in my business day, you go up and you say, well, I have this particular product. I want to reach this kind of person, maybe this gender, maybe this educational group, in this area with this income or whatever, and they will do their very best in trying to target your information to the people who might be most receptive or who you think will be the most receptive to receiving it. So they'll show the ad, but they're not supposed to hand over the raw data. Now, Facebook has recently admitted that the majority of its users' information has been, in fact, accessed by third parties, that it scans your messages, and just because you delete something and it's no longer visible to you doesn't mean that it is actually gone. It is marked as deleted, and they pretty much keep your data forever. It's like trying to break up with a girl you think you're broken up, but then she shows up in various disguises, haunting your every particular step. Also, they can harvest your browsing data using cookies. Now, you can, of course, download, and certainly a good idea to do so, I suppose. You can download the information that Facebook has about you, but it's not the full story. Your browsing data is usually not included in the information. You don't find a complete list of the advertisers that have told Facebook they can target you with ads. You won't find information that references you that you didn't directly upload, like pictures of you that Facebook knows is you that have been uploaded by other people. Or maybe you said, well, I don't want to share my phone number, but somebody else said they want to share their contact list and they can get metadata on phone calls, which is a big problem because you didn't actually officially agree to give your phone number, but they harvest it by scraping other people's phone records and contact lists and so on. So it is a challenge. It also was fascinating, of course, to see Zuckerberg admit that Facebook is working with Robert Mueller because, of course, the whole My Russians fantasy is playing out in social media. The Democrats fully understand, as the left as a whole does, that it is social media that is transforming Western politics and giving it more of a free market and nationalistic and border-friendly kind of perspective and actually achieving success in that. So naturally, rather than make good arguments, they're going to try and shut down the discussion as much as humanly possible. Now, this is according to a search engine, DuckDuckGo. They're pretty pro-privacy. They say that Facebook's trackers are on almost a quarter of the top million websites in the world. So if you're browsing popular websites, your activity can be recorded by Facebook. It can be linked then to your Facebook identity and stored by the company in these databases that seem to go across time, through time, and in n-dimensional space of advertising-friendly, tentacle-up-the-nose invasiveness. And some of this surveillance that they do on browsing history gets them into some hot water with European data protection agencies, but not enough to stop it. Now, one thing I found fascinating, and look, please understand, I'm no lawyer, it's just sort of my opinions about looking at this kind of stuff, which is the question of whether Facebook is more like a library or more like a newspaper, right? So a newspaper prints a bunch of stuff, they choose what's there, and they then put it out there in the world, so they're liable for the content. Whereas a library just has a whole bunch of books, and let's say you find some book in there that says, I don't know, here's how to poison something, and you go out and poison something or someone, the library is not responsible, right? So that is really an interesting question, and there has been, I think since about 1996, this act which says, well, it's kind of contradictory in a way, or there's certain legal standards that kind of cluster around this. So the first thing is, the phone company can't say, well, we're not going to sign you up if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a Libertarian or whatever, you know, or we're not going to continually degrade the quality of your phone conversations if you are a Zoroastrian or a Christian or something like that. And so they just have to sign you up and give you the best service, and regardless of the content of what it is that you're saying. So if you use the phone company to phone in a bomb threat, then you're held. You're responsible for phoning in a bomb threat, but the phone company is not responsible for transmitting that information because they don't discriminate. Now, there are also statutes that say, well, you're allowed to regulate according to community standards. What that means is it's not like anybody's guess, but there are some community standards that you're allowed to censor on. One of those community standards, though, I don't think is being a conservative, right? So that's the big question. if you want to hold this common carrier, which means you're immune from things like defamation and libel and all of that kind of stuff. There's a huge immunity from legal liability if you're just this common carrier. You can't sue the library because they have a book saying do something bad. But if the newspaper prints something that says do something bad, they may be more liable. So the way that you maintain this common carrier, this legal immunity for things, is by not discriminating or not controlling content except on the basis of this general community standards. Well, and I don't think that includes political viewpoints at all, as FedEx has pointed out. So Zuckerberg was grilled on this. Do you control for content? Are you a publisher rather than a neutral sort of common carrier? And I don't know. His answers to those questions, let's just say they led me down a rabbit hole of I wonder if anything further should be investigated regarding this. Because, sure, a private company, you say, oh, well, they can discriminate against whoever they want, and that certainly is true. That certainly is true, but if they start to discriminate, then they lose immunity, as far as I understand it, they lose immunity from particular legal repercussions, which they don't want to do. They really don't want to lose immunity from that. And Zuckerberg appeared to say that he didn't even really know much about the content of the laws that fundamentally govern the massive profits that his company accumulates, which, I don't know. I mean, there are lots of funny memes about his sort of wireless charging mat because he's a pretty short guy and so on, but I don't know. Oh, and by the way, people say, well, he wasn't under oath. You're still not allowed to lie to Congress. You can't be charged with perjury, but you're still not allowed to lie to Congress. So, to me, it's a fascinating question and a very interesting situation that you have this platform for human communication that seems to have a significant ability to affect political outcomes. Now, in general, that's because people aren't taught how to think. It's a failure of government schools that people are so easily, like if you think, oh, a couple of handful of Russian bots is going to change the outcome of the election, well, I would go back to why aren't children being taught how to think and reason and be critical thinkers, and that goes all the way back to, governments don't want that as a whole. So they want citizens who are programmable by governments, but they don't want citizens who are programmable by any other means. Now, it's a bit of a one color. It's not like a very delicate brush. It's one of those roller brushes, right? It gets everything, right? If you raise children to be susceptible to propaganda and programming and so on, well, tragically, this show and other shows accepted who try to teach people critical thinking, well, they're going to be programmable by a whole bunch of people. And this is where censorship comes from. Censorship fundamentally arises from an unwillingness, or perhaps even these days, an inability to teach children critical thinking, and therefore you have to censor it because you want only, they have a big giant button called controllability, but the government is the one that wants to be able to push that button. Once other people figure it out, then the government wants to start censoring other people. It's like, only I sleep with the tart. So that is a very big and interesting question. Now that the perception is that social media influences or affects political outcomes, now suddenly there's this hyper-regulation and control and focus and all this kind of stuff that is going on. Now, again, if you go to some really conservative website and you apply for a job and you say, like, I'm a leftist and I want to write pro-leftist stuff, I'm a Marxist and I want to write pro-Marxist stuff, they're probably not going to hire you because they're going to say, well, listen, we're a conservative website. That's not really what we do here. So that's kind of upfront. That kind of upfrontedness is, to me, the big and foundational question. So if these companies are getting progressively more lefty, activisty, social justice warrior-y, then they need to tell you that up front. They need to say, we have a significant preference for leftist content, and we have significant opposition to conservative content. Let's just say that, for instance, right? Well, if they say that to you up front, that's fine. I mean, you don't go to some leftist, hyper-leftist site and think that they're going to give equal shrift to conservative viewpoints. That's kind of the way that they run. That's the way that they roll. So you know that going in. But if they say or imply, or it's taken for granted that they don't censor or control based upon political viewpoints, then they need to stick to that. Say, oh, well, you can censor whoever you want. Well, you can, but if you tell people you don't censor, but then you do, that seems to me not upfront at all, because then what happens is people start to build followers, and they invest lots of time and money and energy, and maybe they quit their jobs, maybe they go into debt to get studio equipment, and they start broadcasting or publishing or writing, blogging, on the assumption, because they've read through their terms of agreement where it doesn't say anything about discriminating against conservatives, and Ted Cruz was really good in this. And so if people say, well, no, there's nothing in here about discriminating against conservative viewpoints, so I guess I'm going to invest my time, money, and energy in building up a following on this platform, and then if it turns out that they do, in fact, censor or suppress conservative viewpoints or non-leftist viewpoints, well, that's not upfront. That's not honest at all. And this is a very sort of foundational thing and needs to be discussed. And I think at some point there's going to be lawsuits, and at some point in discovery there's going to be someone or some group who has to reveal the algorithms that they use, or the news censors or cultivators or whatever that they use. And this has come out before in some organizations, but it's going to be up front and center. And then if there is bias in the cultivation or promotion of particular viewpoints, which is not spelled out in the user agreement, well, it will be very interesting to see what happens from there. So there's sort of two final points I wanted to make. First of all, I don't actually blame any of the software programmers, the engineers in particular. I mean, I spent 15 years as a software entrepreneur. I built and grew and sold a company, and I was chief technical officer. I hired lots and lots of programmers, worked with them. It's a wonderful environment. It's a great and creative and powerful and passionate group of people that I worked with. Hope everyone's doing really well out there. But the engineers just want to solve problems. They're not particularly motivated by, well, let's promote this viewpoint, and let's suppress this viewpoint, and let's cultivate this perspective, and let's reject this perspective, and they're not so much into manipulation. They're not so much, they just want to make things run faster, be cooler, look better, work easier, whatever you name it. That's the engineer mindset. That's the software programmer mindset. And I was a programmer as well as chief technical officer, and that's what I love to do, was to solve problems. So the question is, with these tech companies that are founded with all of these engineers who love problem solving and don't usually have much of a political agenda to bake, or that they want to bake into the software, the question is, how does it happen? Well, basically, since the Second World War, this giant portal to leftism has opened up in companies, and it's called the HR department. And the HR department occurs for a number of reasons, but a lot of it has to do with quotas, with diversity, with women, and perhaps their sensitivity to particular work situations that formerly would be handled rather brusquely and abruptly by men. And so there's all of these manuals and all of these standards and all of these, to get access to certain government contracts, you need to have this percentage or that percentage of blacks or women and so on. And this is a big portal by which the leftists come in. Now, it's kind of a circular thing, because there just aren't as many female engineers as male engineers. And that's not a function of sexism. That's a function of freedom. When women have fewer economic opportunities, they tend to gravitate more towards the highest paying jobs, often of which, petroleum engineer and so on is male dominated. But then when women get more economic freedom, they tend to gravitate more towards, touchy-feely, relationship-based stuff, which doesn't mean low skill. It can be a family doctor or whatever. But women will generally prefer to work with people a little bit more than men, and men a little bit more than women will generally prefer to work with things, objects, ideas, abstractions, and so on. And so when you say, well, we got to hire a bunch of women and we got to hire a bunch of other groups, then the question is, well, where do you put them? If there really aren't that many that can go productively or positively into the engineering department or, other sort of male-dominated spaces, where do you put them? Well, you put them in HR. And so this, where do you put all the women with women's studies who want to work at tech companies? Can you put them on the hardcore frontline coding arena? Can you make them big, deep, powerful project managers, given that they may also quit to have children? It becomes progressively, I guess pun intended, more difficult. So you have to create a department called HR to put the women where HR demands that you hire them. So this is one of the ways in which this portal of non-customer focused, non-rigorous, non-market facing portals open up in an organization, and that's where the leftists in general go to sit. And then they start creating policies, and then they start dictating employee manuals, and then they start coming up with standards and practices, and then they mire you down in diversity training and sensitivity training, and next thing you know, James Damore is making the circuit because he dared to publish scientific facts about gender differences. So that's really, really important to understand, that you get these mandates, these affirmative action, these minority and female quotas for hiring in companies, and then you end up hiring a bunch of people you can't put into your core business. So what do? Well, you end up with them infecting, in a sense, the culture, like the leftists among them, and the leftists among all groups, but in this particular case, it's a little bit more. They end up infecting the culture through the portal of HR, changing things fundamentally, and then because the power created by the engineers wants to be harnessed by the people who prefer controlling people rather than things, you end up with the culture shifting underfoot and becoming in service to collectivism, in service to the totalitarian elements of the left, and in service of the equality of outcome rather than the equality of opportunity that characterizes central planning and the socialist style of thinking, to be as nice as possible using the word thinking. So that's important. It's important to recognize what the problem here. The problem here is not the free market. The problem is, well, the amount of money that can be controlled in the political process is so prodigious that anyone who can change elections or alter elections or influence elections ends up in control of so much money. The trillions of dollars that change hands maybe differently based upon which political party or ideology is in power. So the fact that they're chasing all of the giant government money through influencing elections, that is where that particular ring of power comes from. And of course, the other is because there's all of these mandates and there's all of these, it's a strong business decision or a positive business decision to start imposing quotas and forcing the hire of minorities and women. But then the problem is if they're not as qualified as, say, the whites and East Asians that you're hiring, then you have a problem. And then you get this particular, it's like a cult forming within the company that significantly influences the direction of the company, clogs up the system of engineering efficiency with rampant central planning, hyper-feels, emotionally manipulative ideology, which then, of course, creates a cycle of business where the new group that's too small to need an HR department can then replace the existing behemoth that have grown too big to survive the increasing gravity of their own ideology. But the last thing I'd say is, there's an old saying that says, if you can't see the product, you are the product. And this is something I think everyone really needs to figure out and really take some time, look in the mirror, think about this. Really, really important. The cat is already out of the bag. You can't put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube, as they say, and if your data's out there, your data's out there. It's been sold, repackaged, harvested, and I mean, Facebook has admitted as much, and I'm sure there are lots of other companies that say massive amounts of user data has gotten out of the enclosure, has escaped the matrix, and is now running wild. And you can't recall that. You can't, right? I mean, it's just the way that it is. And it's pretty terrible stuff. But fundamentally, there is a sin called greed. And the sin called greed is very important. And there's also another saying that says nothing's more expensive than free. Nothing's more expensive. If you've ever been to one of those, like you go on vacation and they say, we'll give you a free breakfast. You just have to listen to a small information package about timeshares. And it's like, free breakfast? Yay. And it's like 4 hours later, you're chewing your way through ropes to try and get out of the enclosure. And nothing's more expensive than free. Nothing has crushed our capacity for rationality and philosophy than the free government schools. And you understand, look at students. Right? You can't. Some states you can't even have a drink. In Canada, Ontario, the legal drinking age is 19. You can't even have a drink, but you can sign up for unholy amounts of student loans in pursuit of a degree not driven by market forces, but by the university's desire to build another useless layer of bureaucracy and a little kingdom in academia, so you can end up in debt for $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 or more, and it's free. See, it's just, hey, I sign these papers, I get all this, and it can destroy your life. It can destroy your life. Nothing is more expensive than the appearance of free. Of course, there is no such thing as a free lunch, and anyone who tells you otherwise is using their syllables to bump into you so they can pick your wallet from the jostling on the other side. So, what is more expensive than free? And Facebook is, quote, free. Well, it's not, of course. They're strip mining your digital soul to sell advertising spots to advertisers. And, of course, sometimes advertisers or malicious third parties get their hands on that data. Your privacy, your security. What are you selling it for? So you don't have to pay $10 or $20 a month to Facebook? Do you think you're saving $10 or $20 a month? I don't know that you are. Pretty sure that you're not. How much would you pay to have all of your data recalled from the various places it's nestled into over the internet? Well, you can, right? It's like taking one of those dandelions, blow it, little spores fly off. It's like 3 weeks later, I want them back. It's like, oh, they've gone undercover, baby, and they ain't coming back. And what is it worth? What is the sin of greed? I want to save $10 or $20 a month. So, sure, you can pillage everything I do in order to serve me up ads. And maybe the ads are helpful. Maybe the ads help you save $50 a month. Maybe. Or maybe they stimulate you to buy things you don't really need because they know how to target and they know what you might be looking for and so on. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. The problem with ads is, you go look for something. You will often look for it in terms of research. You know what you're doing. You're going to buy a laptop or a tablet or something. You know what you're doing, so you've probably gone off and bought it or have some good idea, read the reviews or whatever. And then it's like, hey, would you like to buy this thing that you researched yesterday? It's like, no, I already found out the information that I want. Thanks very much. But what is it worth? The bald fact and the bald reality, frankly, people, is that there are malevolent actors out there with a database that tells them more about you than most of your friends know. There are people out there with no good interests at heart who have harvested more information about you than maybe even your spouse knows, that they know you more intimately than your parents. They know you more intimately than your priest, asterisk, confessionals not included. I mean, you have given up a lot in return for saving a few bucks. It's like that old Jim Morrison song, trading your hours for a handful of dimes. Well, trading your digital soul for a handful of dimes, it's an important question. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Right now, the economy, as it stands, says, why, yes, it is worth it. I guess the question becomes, is it going to be worth it tomorrow or the day after, now that everyone knows how much is being strip mined and sold across the world and how many of your intimate secrets are laid bare for neckbeards to pore over in foreign lands? It's an interesting question. What is the price of your soul?
Stefan Molyneux on YouTube. Check him out. Subscribe. Now, again, we're basically being placed in these social media type boxes where we're communicating with each other, but that's about it. It's really not getting out there. They claim they adjust their algorithms to really target people, but anybody that's ever boosted or advertised on Facebook, they kind of ask you, who are you trying to target? But then they limit your clicks and all that, and then how many are outside clicks, and then the simple fact that then we have to deal with now all the fake claims against accounts. You know, YouTube's, with their copyright, that right there has ended so many YouTube accounts that when it comes to revenue, basically just becomes a secondary upload site for those people instead of what others that post dangerous and idiotic things have made, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars off of it. They get their videos on the front site. Their videos trend. And it's really amazing because, again, I look back at the internet 10, 11 years ago. And it's completely turned upside down where a lot of the sites we used were all small startup. And this kind of even goes back to a lot of what you see when you look locally. You tended to get a better service from the small local company store, the family-owned company, hardware store, little lumber yard, mattress, furniture store. But they were all just little local, family-owned, but you got great service. And you had really a lot of options still. To when big corporate stores come through and buy them up and just turn them into one of their stores, and if you wanted to go there, you would have went there originally. And that seems to be what social media and really the internet has done. It just really became the Walmart where there's no real true, personal service. I think people even crave for that small, family ran store anymore because you really do get that personal touch. And I would almost want to see startups, how Facebook took out MySpace. We need the next evolution of this that takes it back to a small company that allows people to be people. There's a lot of testing with some of these newer little social media platforms that are popping up. You got, DTube that wants to try to rival YouTube and be a place where everybody's voice is heard. A lot of these are going cryptocurrency to do this. And, you have Steam It. That's a good platform to post articles. Or do your blog from, Steam It. And again, they have their own style cryptocurrency that you earn for your postings. But I almost want to see something too that in a way doesn't take us back in the advances in technology, but reminisces the culture that was behind a lot of that technology. So I think that's been lost to bureaucratic and political moves by a lot of these large tech companies. It's become more of that rather than the evolution. Alphabet Inc. and Google and all that, and their investments with their whatever contracts they have with DARPA and all that. Through Boston, I think it's Boston Dynamics. They believe by getting in bed with government, getting the government funding, they can create these things. But the problem is who are you creating them for? What are you creating them for? What advances in civilization do these make? Are you going for authoritarian, or are you going for a free society? And I think that's where they miss their mark. They're completely off. Okay, I have one last clip. I want to play this from We Are Change. And this is the Nikola Tesla story they don't want you to know, from Belgrade, Serbia.
This is Gradowski of WeAreChange.org here in Belgrade, Serbia, a place that prides itself on, of course, Nikola Tesla. And the information that I've been finding out here about Tesla is absolutely mind-blowing. I never knew it was the U.S. Department of Alien Property, along with the FBI and an MIT professor whose name was John G. Trump, Donald Trump's uncle, who were the ones who confiscated and looked into Tesla's documents that no one has yet seen, and of course is shrouded in mystery. Here in Belgrade, we're at the Tesla Research Center that is filled with academics, professors, and other people in the scientific field trying to uncover those mysteries. So let's go inside and see what they have to say. So So I'm here at the International Scientific Nikola Tesla Research Heritage Center, which is a whole big mouthful, of course, with the director here. And a lot of the stuff that I'm finding out here is just absolutely fascinating. I also went through a Lotus test or Onyx test. I also went to the Kharkev's mirror. I'm sorry, I'm very bad at pronouncing a lot of these. Nikolai's Kozlai mirror. And one of the things that really stuck out to me from what you said is that Nikola Tesla wasn't only just a great mind, he was the greatest mind. And you're working here with a lot of...
Even walked the earth. Yeah. The problem is that really we don't know anything about Nikola Tesla. Just some details from... for example, biography, he was born, where he was born, when, 100, 700 inventions, etc. But the Tesla was much more. Let's say he really now, we can say now, is the greatest, not one of the greatest. He's definitely the greatest scientist of our civilization.
He was definitely way before his time. He was very revolutionary.
Yes. He was. Let's say a few thousand years ahead of his time, and the future belongs to Tesla. And if we come back to Tesla's work and character, we can make some progress. Tesla said that he left technical base for the future civilization. The problem is how to go advance, because the base is first of all free energy. If we have free energy for the planet, we can make a very big jump into
peace and a whole way better life.
First of all, we would like to live in a peace. Because it is a shame for our civilization that every problem we should solve by the war.
Yeah, and have to deal with Saudi Arabia and the petrodollar and Iran and all these difficult problems that come just from energy. But one thing that I found really fascinating is that a lot of Nikola Tesla's work is actually still secret.
Yes.
It
is true. It is true. First of all, I was living in Russia 26 years, and I was come back to Belgrade to develop this Tesla's Heritage Center. And I must tell you that all patents in Russia is still until state secret.
Still classified. Top secrets, and the same thing we're learning from the United States, because Nikola Tesla, a lot of the work that he did, he never filed patents for, and there's decades of work that he did that was never kind of officially brought to the world or presented to the world. And when he died, I also heard, correct me if I'm wrong, that the U.S. Department of Alien Property, the U.S. government with the FBI, and also an MIT scientist named John G. Trump, who worked with military radar technology, came in there and actually confiscated a lot of it, kept it secret from the people, and now you're also working with a lot of scholars, a lot of professors, a lot of scientists, committing a lot of experiments, trying to unfold this kind of mind that he's working on. But the story is just amazing that a lot of his secrets are, were literally gone through by Donald Trump's uncle. And
of the president.
Yes,
Trump.
Right now. Yeah.
But we don't know anything about that time. It is really a big mystery what's happened, for example, between 5th and 7th of January. Because 2 days Tesla didn't appear from his hotel's room. What's happened? How it was possible that that he simply died if he died. If he died. And on the other side, as I remember, on the 10th of January, he had appointment with the wife of Eleonora, with Eleonora Roosevelt, wife of the U.S. President Roosevelt. So this period is really remains for researching what's really happened.
Some people say that also that he was working possibly on time travel, free energy, telepathy, consciousness. I kind of heard it described as the science of consciousness, and that he was not only way above in his time with technological kind of revolutions, but also kind of spiritual inside revolutions. Is there more information that you could tell us, maybe about if there was like meditation involved, or the kind of spiritual aspect of Tesla that you were able to uncover with some of the professors?
It is also a matter for researching of all scientists, by all scientists all over the world, because this part of Tesla's life, it is also not known yet. But in any case, for example, we don't know the sources of his acknowledgement, how it was possible that he got from cosmic power or universe or mind, cosmic mind, ideas. And in his mind laboratory, he got perfect invention. Just after that to apply into practice.
I kind of find very interesting is that Tesla was kind of like the original kind of hippie. There's a lot of spiritual symbology in his work. He wasn't doing anything for money. He ended up getting screwed over by all these kind of robber barons, J.P. Morgan Chase, Thomas Edison, and he still did it because he wanted to make the kind of world a better place, and it wasn't really a monetary incentive, which was really fascinating. Can you talk more about kind of his progression and what kind of things do you see him going down this path?
Only we can suppose, not to prove. Tesla was sent. Tesla was sent to the earth to do something for humankind and human being, and he was not interested in money, in fortune, and he lived alone in different hotels, and we should pay more attention to his life. And he knew very well about his goal, about his task, about his purpose of life, and he was very good informed about cosmic task. And you cannot find a lot of scientists with the cosmic task. You can see in the history of the science, it is just a few scientists devoted to the human being, to our civilization. Because of that, as I told you, the cosmic value of his heritage is the symphony, is ode to the man. The man like the strongest being in cosmos. Mm-hmm. Only due to serious problem in our life, material position, salaries, bills, etc., we should fight for the surviving, not to develop what we have inside. It is our spirit, and we should do it much more to be more spiritual being.
Thank you so much for this big information download and all the tests and all the experiments we did here. If there's one thing that there's definitely a fact is that Tesla is not getting the attention he deserves, especially historically, for all the things that he came up with and did for kind of human civilization. I want to thank you for trying to preserve that and studying and researching and having all these scholars here and doing all these experiments that you guys are doing here. Is there anything else that you would like to say about the work that you do here or just Tesla by himself?
Our goal is not only to preserve Tesla's heritage, for example, not only to preserve, but to develop it, to research it, to study a lot of more than 160,000 documents stayed in the unique museum Nikola Tesla in the world. It is in Belgrade here, and you should go there next time. We should study these documents, especially it is about 40,000 documents, very important for the scientist. It is in a process of digitalization, and we should wait to stay to see. And you can see, for example, this box. It was gift. The same you can find the same box you can find in the museum. Because our general consul of the Yugoslav embassy in New York at that time, he bought it for example, for Tesla, and it is a long story to explain how we got it, etc. But it is very interesting and very sorry that the unique support, financial support for Tesla was given by Yugoslavia before Tesla died. It is a really pity, and this time of period we also should study why America didn't find the way to provide for Tesla comfortable life in a hotel, to at least to pay all bills for the hotel cost. It is a pity, really, and we should discover the documents, how he was living in the hotel, especially. He paid a lot of attention to his health, because Tesla planned to live at least 140 years. What's happened? And of course, 86 years to live, it is not a short life, but in any case, he planned to live much more, double more. Because of that, sometimes we study, for example, his style of life, what he was eating, what was the menu for the breakfast, for the dinner, etc. He was rejected, for example, cigarettes, alcohol, sugar, etc. It was a healthy way of life, and he was walking every day at least 10 miles, etc. So he was so interesting person in all aspects of his life. So like joke. If he didn't become like the greatest scientist, he could become the greatest cooking, because he follow menu and especially foods for in his life.
Thank you again so much for that information download. If you want more information about the International Scientific Nikola Tesla Research Heritage Center here in Belgrade, Serbia, the link, of course, will be in the description below. If you're in Serbia, definitely check it out. They have lectures and experiments doing all this awesome stuff. We're going to be in contact. I definitely want to come back here when you guys are doing more trips and more different kind of studies. Thank you once again for all the work you're doing to really preserve and understand and to build on top of all the amazing work that Tesla did before.
You're always welcome.
We are change. We are change.org. We are change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, with you look at Tesla's story, and I mean really research Tesla. Research the facts that are out there on Tesla, and you look at his story, and it's reminiscent of what's going on today. And when I say that, I mean in the fact that history is being rewritten. Facts are being manipulated or lied. There's a lot of just flat out lies. And even though we have social media and all this, we still have an ability to go a little old school. A lot of the information that we have, a lot of the collections of information, facts, old books that you can digitally get already. Print these off, collect these. It takes up room, but if you can have that little extra room, buy books. Don't let history be rewritten. And then that also gives you a resource for your children when they are researching things. Give them the resources that are going to give them facts. Because even when I was in school, the facts weren't taught. I think I heard about Tesla from a teacher, but it was way after we learned about Edison and never heard anything about Tesla. Now, I have this article, as long as it comes up. Now, I've seen this one at reason.com, and there were, I believe this group basically put out false information that was, in a way, completely writing history in a false narrative. And this article from Reason, Southern Poverty Law Center scraps its anti-Muslim hate list. Last month I wrote a piece calling out the Southern Poverty Law Center, the country's self-appointed watchdog of hate groups. And this is by Shika Dalmia. I I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. But for putting Ayan Irisi Ali, the Somali victim of genital mutilation, and Majid Nawaz, a Muslim militant turned reformer, on its anti-Muslim hate list, along with genuine Islamophobes like Pamela Geller. And yesterday came word that the SPLC quietly scrapped its list called the Journalist Manual Field Guide to Anti-Muslim Extremists. Poof, it's gone. I wish I could take credit for helping SPLC see the light, but I suspect the real reason was that Nawaz recently retained Claire Locke, the same firm that went after Rolling Stone for publishing the University of Virginia rape confabulation, to sue SPLC for defamation. Nawaz claims that SPLC showed a reckless disregard for the truth. The legal bar for proving actual malice is to make a defamation lawsuit stick when it put him on its hate list. And instead of fighting him in court, SPLC seems to have folded like a four-flusher. Worse, unlike most responsible outfits that issue a correction when they make a mistake, SPLC removed its list without a word. Now, if SPLC has indeed backed down, one can't be sure because it didn't respond to queries for comment. It can't be because it is wanting for resources like some poor nonprofit operating out of a trailer park. It owns one of the plushest buildings in Alabama and has net assets upward of $328 million that it's been doubling literally every decade. No, it's because it probably didn't want probing litigation to expose just how hollow its name and shame exercise is. Nawaz believes that Islam is a religion of peace and is publicly spooked by the rising Islamophobia in the West. How could he not be he is after all a practicing Muslim in Pakistan, descendant living in Britain. He routinely condemns anti-Muslim bigotry and insists that Muslim profiling is counterproductive and ineffective on Fox News to boot. So how in Allah's name did he land on a list of people who allegedly routinely espouse a wide range of utter falsehoods, all designed to make Muslims appear as bloodthirsty terrorists or people intent on undermining American constitutional freedoms? And they put this guy on a hate list, Muslim hate list. And they've also had their, what was it? Was it a domestic terrorist watch list or something like that? And they had We Are Change, InfoWars, Oath Keepers, what was it? There were a few other ones that were literally just Tea Party, I'm pretty sure was one of them too. but that was something we knew was coming down the ladder eventually. Because that's not the first place we've seen constitutional or libertarian, the Oath Keeper type people, Ron Paul supporters. You can go back to the MIAC report. And if you don't know what the MIAC report is, you really need to look that up and research it. Because they were basically calling us, anybody that supported Ron Paul, had a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Basically, anybody that was a patriot is a possible domestic terrorist. Basically, like a feeling of a Red Dawn type characterization of anybody that supported Ron Paul. And some people claim that, well, it was an overreaction. There was people that were put on watch lists that couldn't get on a plane because, well, they worked on Ron Paul's campaign or was somehow associated. And look at, that person's Ron Paul sticker. Luckily, we're not there anymore, but we still have a lot of issues we're facing. Sorry. Thought I had that. Breaking news alert, but I guess it wasn't. Let me double check here. But, again, back to collecting books and a lot of philosophy, not only collecting them, make sure you yourself understand them, because right now the left, through the media and their little puppet organizations, are pushing what a lot of Americans are not really truly supporting. They can sit there and act like, oh, Americans are behind gun control, and it's already backing off again. Emotions get high right after an incident like that. We're still luckier than a lot of people around the world. In a lot of socialist, communist, dictatorial, ran countries, we're still holding on to a little bit of freedom, and it's really up to us to make sure that gets passed down, that idea of freedom. And we can't let it be erased. So eventually they're not going to be able to win when it comes to ideas of freedom. It's going to again turn around. But how long is it going to take, and what is the country going to look like once it does? Now, we have a few people that are still part of Congress that have a grasp of what freedom truly means. You know, you have Justin Amash, you have Rand Paul, you know, there's others in Congress that they're kind of sitting there in the shadow ready to strike with facts and truth, but they need backup, and I think we need to really start pushing those more constitutional libertarian philosophy people that truly believe in freedom, that understand prohibition doesn't work, that understand taxation doesn't help. If we get to a point where we no longer can speak or think without every word, every emotional outbreak, everything is recorded. How safe do you feel about your privacy? How safe do you feel about your family's privacy? And like I've said for years, I believe that the tech community outside of these large organizations, they're going to be the ones to revolutionize the way we use the internet and the way we use our electronics, so we can be private, so we can be safe and not have everything intercepted and watched. You know, years ago we talked about people creating technology to make basically where I can connect to you down the road and you connect to someone else, and you create a network that people that are, you know, connected to the internet, that information can flow. And, you know, I thought that was out of this world, but they're already getting there. There's already betas out there in different markets. See, now, if we get to a point where we can't speak freely, when the alternative media is shut down, when mainstream media does what they do best already, just parrots what they're told to say, and discourse is no longer left, we no longer have any sort of freedom. We are at the end of this broadcast. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV. Great broadcast coming up after this. Don't forget to help support UCY.TV. If you go to UCY.TV, there's a donate button. Click that donate button. You can donate and help support UCY. And also there's an Amazon button. You click the Amazon button, shop Amazon through UCY.TV. And we get a little kickback while you get the same great price, the same great shit.